Yeah.
Don't go.
When you come in and out, I want it to slam.
All right. Have fun. Have fun recording.
Thanks. Robert Taylor, everyone. Hello, good afternoon, and happy Friday, HFC kids. Here is another lesson preparing you for Ken's message this Sunday. Last week, if you missed it, we talked about baptism to prepare you guys for outdoor service as people were starting to get baptized. Today, we're not talking about anything special about service. We're going to talk about Ken's message, what Ken is going to be speaking on. And if you're here in person, then you're going to be in the audience listening. You're going to be part of the congregation listening to Ken's sermon. But he's mostly talking to adults during that sermon. So I wanted to make sure that you were able to know parts of the story that he was going to be teaching about on a kid's level rather than to adults. So this is just for kids to help understand what church is going to be on this upcoming Sunday. But if you're unable to make it to kids' church, or if you're unable to make it to service on Sunday, then this will be your kids' lesson for the week, and you can learn a little bit about Adonijah. We left off our Old Testament story from Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges. We made it through all of that in the era of the Israelite history in the Old Testament. And we skipped Ruth and went ahead to 1 Samuel. And I don't know if you were here for kids' church or if you watched that lesson, but Samuel was the last judge of Israel, and it was his job to crown the new king of Israel. So now we are in the era of kings. We went from the Israelites getting their promises from God when they were in Canaan with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then Joseph brought the Israelites to Egypt. So they were in Egypt for a little while. Then Moses took them out of Egypt and into the wilderness where they lived and received their law. Then Joshua took them into the promised land where they were then ruled and taken care of by judges and priests. And now the Israelites are saying, we're tired of not being able to see who's in charge. We want to have a king. You guys are all listening to God, but we can't see God and we can't hear God. So it would be easier for us if we just followed a king, a man to be in charge rather than God in charge. And if you remember, we crowned Saul king. And God was upset with the Israelites because he understood something that they didn't. Something different about men versus God is men will do things their own way sometimes. Men are not always going to be powerful. They're not always going to be wise. They're not always going to be kind. They're not always going to be helpful. And sometimes they're really mean, and sometimes they're really bad leaders. However, God is all powerful, and he is omnipresent, and he's able to do so many things that a man couldn't do. Because of this contrast, because of this difference, God said, I don't know why you would rather have a man who could definitely and will definitely let you down because no one's perfect. Why would you rather have that than a God who is perfect and is in control and is all-knowing and all-powerful? But the Israelite people insisted that they wanted a king, so they chose Saul. And Saul was the first king, this is my crown, the first king to serve over Israel. And he was their ruler. He helped them win battles. He helped them conquer people groups. They fought against the Philistines. And then after Saul came a guy named David. And we didn't talk about David in these lessons, in these video lessons, but if you went to kids' church before COVID-19, back in February, we spent the month of February learning about David. So if you can go way far back in your brains to that, there was David. David served God with his whole heart. He wasn't perfect. He was still a man. He still messed stuff up. He couldn't do everything right all the time. He definitely made some mistakes. He definitely followed things other than God. And he definitely got in trouble on a few places. But overall, he loved God and he wanted to follow God. And he was the best king that Israel ever had. And he was only the second one. It's the second king, and he ended up being the best one ever. And when he died, that's where our story picks up today. That's where Ken's sermon picks up on Sunday. David was the king and in charge from the time he had power from the time he was like a teenager up until the time he died. And that was a pretty long time. The Israelites were pretty used to following David. But when he died, they were trying to decide who the new king was going to be. God was going to pick a new king. And he was going to pick someone who would be a great leader, just like he picked Saul and just like he picked David. He was going to pick a new leader named Solomon, one of David's sons. However, David had another son named Adonijah. It's a kind of hard word to say. I'm going to put it right here on the screen. Adonijah. Adonijah did not like the idea that he was not going to be king, that his brother Solomon was going to be king instead. And he was very selfish. We talked about how men aren't always perfect. Adonijah was rude and he was mean and he didn't follow God. He didn't wait for God to pick him. He decided that he was going to be king all on his own. God didn't like that. That was not God's plan. God's plan was for him to choose Solomon. And Adonijah didn't want to listen. And the crazy thing is, Adonijah means the Lord, my Lord, is Yahweh. I am. Just like we talked about in Moses, when God said, I am, he was omnipresent, omnipowerful. He had all of this strength. That's who God is. Adonijah, his name meant, my Lord is Yahweh, that powerful God that's perfect. But Adonijah did not stay very true to his name. He did not act like God was his Lord. He wanted to be in charge. He wanted to lead over Israel. He wanted to be the one that ruled the kingdoms and the armies, and he had people rounded up to help support him, and it was all about Adonijah and not about what God wanted. And that's how the book of 1 Kings starts out. 1 Kings chapter 1 is about Adonijah, David's son, who desperately wanted to be king. I wanted to play a little bit of a game with you that teaches you about perspective, that teaches you that the way we see things is different than the way others may see things. We might notice things that other people don't. But God has the best perspective. God knows everything and can see everything. He is all-knowing and all-seeing. He's omniscient. And so we're going to play a little bit of a game here about our perspective. I'm going to show you a picture super close up of something special, something that you should know what it is, recognize it somehow. But since it's going to be so close, since your perspective is going to be different, you might not know exactly what it is. Adonijah had a very selfish and him-focused perspective. His only thing that he was able to see was what he wanted. He didn't care about what God wanted. And when you can't see the whole picture, it's really hard to determine what you're supposed to do. When you can't see the whole picture of these images I'm about to show you, it's really hard to tell what the picture is of. So here in just a second, I'm going to show you the first one. Here is a picture super zoomed in of something that you probably recognize. If you saw it big from an outside perspective, from a normal perspective in our minds, you would be able to tell what it is. Can you tell what it is right now? It's pasta. It's homemade pasta. If you cook that pasta and you put some sauce on it, it's just like something you would get at Olive Garden or Fazoli's or that your mom would make for you. Because you have a limited perspective, you might not have been able to tell what that was. Here's another one. Can you tell what this picture is of? We have very limited perspectives. We cannot see the whole picture. We might be able to guess, but since we can't see the whole thing, we don't know exactly what's happening. This one was a spider. Here's a picture of it. All normal. You can tell what it is for sure in that picture. Here's another one, number 3. This is another picture that's super zoomed in. From your perspective, what do you think this is? It's the eraser and end of a pencil. Now, you probably use a pencil every day, but were you able to recognize, super zoomed in, that this was a pencil? What about this one? This one's my favorite. There's your hint. It's my favorite. If you've been to any of my classes or if you've watched these videos before, you might remember. That's a little bit of a hint. What is this from our limited perspective? What is this a picture of? Here it is big. It's a panda. I love pandas. It's a panda eating some bamboo. All right, last one. This is your last close-up perspective. Are you able to tell what this is a picture of? This is something you would normally be able to recognize if you could see it from a normal perspective, but do you know? Here it is, normally. Did you get it right? Maybe you got all of those right. Maybe you got none of them right. But the thing is, it's super tricky to know things when you don't have the whole picture, when you can only see a small part of it. In Adonijah's mind, he thought he knew exactly what was happening, but his perspective was so limited. He had blinders on, only focusing on what he wanted to look at. He couldn't see the big picture like God did. God can see the big picture of every situation. He knows what's going on in everybody's minds, in everyone's feelings, and all across the world, every animal, every mountain. He knows all about it. He's all-knowing, omniscient. But Adonijah, even though his name means the Lord is my God, or my Lord is Yahweh, he still didn't completely understand what his job was supposed to be. He was so focused on his own perspective that he didn't think about or care about the people or God's perspective. So let that be a lesson to you this week as we go throughout our weeks, as you listen to Ken's sermon on Sunday. How selfish this person was. And sometimes maybe you need to think about your perspective on your own life. Maybe you need to take your blinders off and realize God has a better perspective of what people are saying to you, of what's going on in your life, of what's going on around you. Even this crazy virus, COVID-19, and the way schools are different and the way sports are different. God knows the big picture. We only can see a little bit. If we could see the whole thing, we would probably understand exactly what's going on. But because we can't, we have to trust God and follow him and listen to him because he's the one that knows and we don't. People aren't perfect. No man of a leader was going to be as good of a leader as God. The Israelites wanted a man, but here they're starting to see that they're going to let him down sometimes. The king is going to let the people down, but God will never let them down. Slowly they start learning that. We'll learn that over the next few weeks. But what you need to remember is think about the big perspective. Trust God and that he can see everything. You can only see a little bit. What are the decisions that you're making? Are they based off your limited perspective or based off of God's big perspective? Are you trusting God? Are you following him? Are you listening for his directions? Or are you only focused on what you want in your limited perspective? I hope you have a great weekend and a great week. We will be doing this again next Friday. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you with hopefully more open perspectives in a different game or craft or something next Friday. Bye, HFC kids.